The name Auschwitz echoes through the corridors of history as a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity during the Second World War. It was a place where industrial-scale extermination became a horrifying reality, overseen by men who embraced an ideology of hatred and death. While many Nazi perpetrators sought to evade justice in the war's aftermath, a rare and symbolic fate awaited the very architect of Auschwitz's killing machinery, Rudolf Höss. His story is a descent into unimaginable darkness, followed by a reckoning within the very walls he had commanded. Rudolf Höss, the man who would become synonymous with the horrors of Auschwitz, did not begin his life as a mass murderer. Born in 1901, his early years were marked by a troubled adolescence and a propensity for violence. Before his deep involvement with the Nazi regime, Höss was actually imprisoned for manslaughter, a crime committed at the behest of the future powerful Nazi figure, Martin Bormann. This early brush with the law and violence foreshadowed the brutality that would later define his actions. Höss joined the burgeoning Nazi Party early on, finding a sense of belonging and purpose within its hateful ideology. He quickly rose to the ranks of the Schutzstaffel, the SS, Heinrich Himmler's notorious paramilitary organization. Recommended by Himmler himself, Höss joined the Death's Head units, the SS branch responsible for administering the concentration camp system. He served as a guard in various camps, gaining experience in the brutal machinery of repression. Notably, Höss was in command during the first execution of a Jehovah's Witness conscientious objector at Sachsenhausen concentration camp, a grim precursor to the mass killings he would later orchestrate. Höss's efficiency and dedication to the SS cause led to further promotions. In 1940, he was assigned to inspect a site in Poland near the town of Auschwitz, which the SS envisioned as a new, large concentration camp. Höss submitted a detailed report, and subsequently, he was given the daunting task of creating a transition camp for 10,000 prisoners, utilizing existing, well-preserved buildings. This transition camp would evolve into the sprawling death complex known as Auschwitz. Living in a villa adjacent to the camp with his wife and children, Höss oversaw the relentless expansion of Auschwitz. By 1941, it had grown into a vast network of forced labor camps and, most infamously, a dedicated extermination facility. Places like the Death Wall were constructed, where thousands of inmates were systematically shot. Höss himself was a frequent witness to these brutal executions, his conscience seemingly unmoved by the scale of the suffering. The true horror of Auschwitz under Höss's command began to unfold following a pivotal meeting in Berlin in 1941. Summoned by Heinrich Himmler, Höss received the direct order to implement the final solution, the systematic annihilation of European Jews at Auschwitz. Höss embraced this monstrous task with chilling efficiency. He experimented with various methods of mass killing, ultimately introducing Zyklon B, a cyanide-based pesticide, into the camp's gas chambers. Höss personally witnessed the horrific trials of this method, where hundreds of innocent lives were extinguished. In his later confessions, Höss offered a disturbingly detached account of the extermination process. He stated that the killing itself was technically simple and swift, capable of eliminating thousands in a short time. The real challenge in his cold calculation was the disposal of the countless bodies. He callously noted that the victims were often deceived into believing they were entering showers, walking willingly into the gas chambers, unaware of the deadly poison that awaited them. Under Höss's command, hundreds of thousands of Jews, along with Roma, Poles, Soviet prisoners of war, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime, were systematically exterminated in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. Höss continued to expand the killing capacity of Auschwitz, turning it into the most efficient death factory in history. In 1942, he became embroiled in a scandal involving an inmate, leading to his temporary replacement in 1943. However, his expertise in mass extermination was deemed too valuable to lose entirely. In May 1944, Höss was recalled to Auschwitz to oversee Operation Höss, a horrific undertaking focused on the extermination of approximately 430,000 Hungarian Jews in a mere 56 days. The existing facilities were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of death, forcing the SS to burn countless bodies in large open pits. At the peak of this operation, an estimated 10,000 people were being gassed every day. As the tide of the war turned against Germany, Höss ended up working at the all-female concentration camp of Ravensbrück, where he oversaw the completion of a gas chamber and the subsequent murder of around 2,000 women. Knowing that capture meant certain death, Höss attempted to evade Allied forces by living under a false name, Karl Höss, in a German town. His wife, Hedwig, was aware of his whereabouts and his assumed identity as a gardener. Himmler had provided Höss with a cyanide capsule as a last resort. However, fate intervened when Hedwig Höss was arrested. Facing interrogation, she revealed her husband's location, leading to his capture in 1946 by British soldiers. When confronted, Höss initially insisted he was a simple gardener. However, a keen-eyed British sergeant, Alexander, noticed his wedding ring. Upon closer inspection, Rudolf Höss's real name was inscribed inside. Faced with this undeniable proof and the threat of having his finger forcibly removed, Höss's facade crumbled. He was arrested and subsequently brought to the Nuremberg trials, not as a primary defendant, but as a defense witness for Ernst Kaltenbrunner, a high-ranking SS official. In a chilling display of his detached nature, Höss calmly recounted the scale of the atrocities at Auschwitz, claiming that at least 2.5 million victims were gassed and burned, with another 500,000 succumbing to starvation and disease during his command. He later revised these figures, but the enormity of the crimes remained staggering. Following his testimony at Nuremberg, Höss was extradited to Poland to stand trial in the nation where his crimes were most heinous. His trial in Warsaw lasted 2 weeks in March 1947. Unsurprisingly, he was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. However, many survivors and former prisoners of Auschwitz petitioned the court for a special execution, to have Höss meet his end within the very camp he had defiled. This request was granted. In the days leading up to his execution, Höss, confined his prison cell, made a shocking declaration, a belated acknowledgement of his monstrous deeds. He confessed that his conscience compelled him to recognize the grave sins he had committed against humanity as the Commandant of Auschwitz. He admitted his responsibility in carrying out the cruel plans of the Third Reich for human destruction, inflicting terrible wounds and unspeakable suffering, particularly on the Polish people. He asked for forgiveness from God and the Polish nation. On April 16, 1947, Rudolf Höss was taken from his prison cell and transported back to Auschwitz. Fears of potential lynching had delayed the execution, but within the camp's barbed wire fences, approximately 100 witnesses had gathered to witness the final act of justice. This was a public execution, a stark contrast to the secret murders Höss had overseen. Photographs were taken, documenting the proceedings. A gallows, fitted with a trapdoor, had been constructed by German prisoners of war just hours before. Armed guards secured the area, and no one was allowed entry without a special pass. Höss arrived at the camp at 8 a.m. After a final cup of coffee, he was briefly held in Block 11, the infamous torture block. At 10 a.m., he was let out, walking with surprising energy to the gallows in the center of the camp. Handcuffed, he was assisted onto the platform. A local priest offered him spiritual counsel. Höss was then positioned on the stool above the trapdoor. The death sentence was read aloud. The hangman secured the noose around Höss's neck, adjusting it at the former commandant's movement. At 10:08 a.m., the stool was removed, the trapdoor sprung, and Rudolf Höss, the architect of death, was left hanging, his reign of terror finally over. 30 minutes later, he was pronounced dead. Rudolf Höss became the last person to be publicly executed in Poland, a grim and symbolic closure within the gates of Auschwitz, the very place where he had orchestrated the deaths of over 1 million souls.